Okay, we're live. I'll see you at Q&A, Alton.
All right. How is everybody doing? Give me a moment so I can. All right. It's good to see everybody. And this is our first webinar of the new year. So we're excited to come and share good information, up to date trends on what's happening in the college admissions landscape, but just excited to be back on. So I just want to let you know that Anthony, the my trusted partner in crime, Anthony, will be jumping back on at the end to do some Q&A, and excited to have everybody here. If you don't mind, go ahead and go on to the chat and let us know. Oops, let us know where you are calling in from. And so you can go ahead and just put down what city and or country and or wherever it might be, and go ahead and let us know. That would be fantastic. Hailing from Los Gatos and Palo Alto, fantastic. Good to see everybody. I always like Cleveland, Ohio. My wife, born in Cleveland. We have some people from Canada. That's fantastic. Good to see everybody. Oklahoma City. I know it's been cold this past week, so good to have everybody. A lot of Californians, as always. I do want to let you know that you can go on to the Q&A window and post a question at any time. And Anthony's going to come back and we will go through all the questions and do our best to answer as much and as well as we can. So go ahead and keep posting onto the chat and let us know where you're calling in from. But excited to have everybody. Hey, tonight's conversation piece is going to be about making your summer count. So I know that for a lot of parents, whether you are a parent of a ninth, 10th, or 11th grader, really thinking about creative and constructive things to do for this summer is always a challenge. And so I want to do my best to provide some content and some ways to look at your summer, even some concrete ideas about how to do so, and then hopefully it'll be helpful for you at the end, and you'll have something good to come for this coming summer for your student. Let's go through. If you don't mind, let me just do a little bit of an intro. I do recognize some of the names, so many of you know me, but for some of the others, my name is Elton Lin. I'm the CEO and founder of Illumin Education. I've been doing college advising for almost 16 years. Actually, the 300 number is even an old number. So our team, we have 13 counselors in our team, work with almost 500 students a year. Certainly submit over 2,000 apps a year. So even in our own pool of students, we see quite a few results even within our pool. And our students have been admitted to every top 50, including every Ivy League multiple times over. Our internal admit rate to top 15 schools is anywhere between 3 to 7x the national average. So, for example, like a Stanford, maybe a 4% admit rate. Our internal admit rate is around 15.5%. But for schools like Duke and Johns Hopkins, it's certainly much higher, kind of closer to 40%. So we can certainly can't promise anything, but can certainly do our best to help our students put their best foot forward. And as I've mentioned here, I've had the privilege of being profiled in different news and media outlets, and excited to share a lot of the info we've learned along the way. So let me come back to here. And also, just for all of you who are attending, we have a free gift. So, if we produced a few years back an ebook that interviewed admission officers from schools like Dartmouth, Harvey Mudd, and UC Berkeley, and asked them an array of questions about how they review the application, how they read essays, and which includes even like mistakes made on applications. So if that is of interest to you, feel free to snap the QR code and just answer a few questions, and we'll be excited to send you the ebook. And I'll have this QR code later on as well, so don't worry if you don't catch it right now. So our topics for tonight, and tonight is 6 p.m. West Coast time for you. Maybe the East Coasters, maybe a little bit later. But our topics for tonight, the most critical trends for 2025-26, making the summer count. We'll go ahead and do some student examples as well. And then we'll open it up for questions and answer really as many questions and of wide range of questions as many as you have. So, what are the current trends in college admissions? If I can maybe share one very obvious one, the application total, generally speaking, has been going up. So, there's been almost a 35% increase in total applications since 2020. A 5% may seem meager, but it's actually fairly significant. But a 5% increase in early applications. There are more and more schools. Maybe as a side note, there are more and more schools that are using early decision to fill their forthcoming freshman class. Um, and as you can probably imagine, admit rates are coming down with an increase in the number of applicants. If you kind of take a look at just this comparison chart with a lot of top schools, admit rate in 2020, admit rate of 2025. I think if you just scan like the Harvard, Yale, MIT, Dartmouth, I mean, I don't think there's any real significant surprise. It was hard in 2020, and guess what? It's still hard in 2025. So really, it's not, to be frank, changed all that much. But I think when you think about the schools like an NYU or a UCLA or a USC, I know that when I applied to college in 1991, back in the day, USC was everybody's safety school. But certainly these days, USC is more and more challenging to gain admission to. And schools like UT Austin, one thing I didn't make, well, that's very specific to that 10% and 10% specific rate is it's the out of state admit rate. So if you're a Texas resident, anybody who's from Texas on the call, it is a different for a Texas resident, but for those of us, since we're based in the Bay Area, the out of state admit rate for UT Austin is 10%. For University of Washington, it's a 39% dropping from 51%. For University of Washington, if you get real specific with computer science, the admit rate is around 2 or 3%. So what was before a safety school, even perhaps many of you who were applying back when I was applying, is now either a target or even a reach school. And bottom line, everything is unfortunately getting a little bit more competitive. Let's take a real quick look at the UCs. This is last year's, actually the cycle before's total applicant pool. 173,000 total applications for UCLA. I mean, it's remarkable, right? And even for a school like UC Davis at 120,000 applications, it really did skew and impact the admit rate or admit likelihood, especially for specific high demand majors. Again, like computer science, engineering, like pre-med majors like biology and those kind of things, right? So the increase in applicants is really certainly a continuing storyline. Applications to public colleges, generally speaking, have increased more so than private colleges. Now, if you want to get into the data, you can certainly there's more articles on this. For a few schools, including like Dartmouth actually had a reduction in total applicants. But just generally, by and large, there's been an increase in total applications. And one culprit of that is that students are applying to more schools. So if I'm sure many of you are parents, perhaps are counselors. I know that when I started doing this work, students were submitting like 4 or 5 applications. They were submitting one UC application, which encompasses maybe 5, 6, 7, or 8 schools. And then they were submitting maybe 3 or 4 other applications. Now, our students are largely submitting 10, 11, 12, or even more applications which is then if one of those is the UC application, is it is then yielding for them maybe upwards of like 17 or 18 results. And a lot of that is I just don't know where I'm getting into. So I may as well just apply to more schools. And so which certainly causes, it's understandable and yet makes it more difficult for students to predict where they're getting into. It also makes it more difficult for universities to predict where students are going. So I do feel like that's another presentation for another time. We can talk about college lists, yield rates, all the exciting stuff that we'll get into in another presentation. But just to let you know that this is happening and it's a part of what is happening on the landscape. So when there's an influx or increase in the total applicant pool, you can imagine that just generally speaking, there may be a little bit less time on each application. You may get the sense that that reviewers are seeing the same activities across different applications. Maybe just more of them, and there's more people who are doing research, or there's more people who are getting certain types of awards. Whatever the case may be, you're kind of seeing maybe perhaps the same activities over and over again. But the truth is that admissions teams are still looking for the same things. They're still looking for depth in a student's area or intended major area. They're still looking for just demonstrations or examples of leadership, and they're still looking for just forms of commitment. So whether it's longevity in a particular activity, or however that might be expressed, they're still really looking for the same things. And so maybe quickly, a few other trends for 2025-26. Testing is back in the sense where there's been an 11% increase in students who are submitting them as part of their application package. International students are declining, and I do feel like that's a very live number that I think changes from year to year. So let's kind of see how it all fares out next year. But having been involved in, more engaged in the international students sort of group or audience more in the last year and a half. I don't think demand has come down. I think some of it has largely been the environment in the United States, but international students still want to come to the United States. And then colleges are filling a higher percentage of their freshman class on the early decision rounds. So I don't think it's, this is not the webinar for early decision, but it is something to where it does impact where students apply to. It does impact the strategy behind how students think about which schools they apply to, which schools they apply to early, how they prioritize, which schools are more important to them. So it does make that impact. So if those of you who represent perhaps rising seniors, I know that webinar is coming, so we'll kind of do a deep dive into early decision. And maybe just to kind of give you a quick glance into how ED impacts the admit rate, for like a school like Northeastern, just looking at the top of this chart, the regular admit rate being at 4%. That's changed a little bit for 2025. I feel like Northeastern's regular admit rate has kind of normalized a little bit, has not been so extreme. But their ED admit rate in 2024 was 43%. So you can see that if you apply ED versus applying regular decision, it's a significant difference in your likelihood of being admitted. So you can kind of do a quick glance at the different admit rates here. And then lastly, what other trends for 2025-26? College majors impact the admit rate. There's no question. So whether you are applying in as a finance major versus a French major, they're not the same. And a lot, a slightly oversimplified description of that is that it's largely just based on the number of applicants, in relation to the number of spots at a university, right? But certainly college majors do impact it. Maybe to kind of give you like a little case study, we did interview on our same webinar series the UC Santa Barbara, one of the associate directors at UC Santa Barbara mentioned that The and this was back in 2023. Overall acceptance rate was 26%. There's 90 majors at UC Santa Barbara. 100, at that time, 125,000 applicants. 10,000 of that 125 applied to computer science. 8,000 of that 10,000 had 4.0 or higher UC GPA, and really only 800 students were accepted. So in relation to the overall admit rate, so sometimes you look at the admit rate that's published and you think 26%, oh, my chances are, not that bad. But if you're applying this computer science, then it changes everything, right? So maybe just some specific admit rates for specific majors at a school like UCLA. For computer science, it's 3%, and this is all admit likelihood, put out there by UCLA themselves. If you're biology, biochemistry, maybe around 12%, but computer science and nursing, a lot of families come in and talk about wanting to apply to nursing. They don't realize that nursing is indeed one of the most competitive majors um, in all majors, right? So, and I would say even for within engineering, there are different admit rates for specific engineering disciplines. So even for UCLA, computer science is 3%, but chemical engineering 17%, materials engineering, material science and engineering is 15%. So even thinking about like if you're interested in engineering, but you're open to different types of engineering, then maybe even thinking about other forms of engineering might be an advantageous way to think about the admit rate. So, what does this mean for the summer? I think the first most important thing is that no matter what, grades and test scores are still the most important. So, I think, no matter what we discuss about activities, if somebody has this like magnificent, internship at Meta or has sold, $100,000 worth of like sneakers online, which is impressive, but grades and test scores are still most important. Secondly, but secondly, with regards to your activities, it's important to tell a clear story with your activities. UC application read is like 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Like no one's gonna tell you that it's like but the reality is that with so many applications, the entire application is read so quickly. They're trying to grab as much data as quickly as possible. So, like the activities you do put together as one package into a resume need to tell a clear story to the reader in a very short amount of time. So maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes for UC read, maybe 4 to 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes on a private school read. Either way, it's very short. And so it's important to tell a clear story. What are admissions people asking is that is there clear interest in the intended majors? So if you declare computer science as your major, have you done anything related to computer science? Now, in a major that's more selective, like computer science and other engineerings, where there are more applicants than there are spaces, then they're clearly going to lean more towards a student who's really demonstrated that interest in that particular major. So, is there a clear interest in that intended major? And is there enough depth in that particular area of interest to show ability and proficiency? And so, I mean, you may, do your activities show like actual like your motivation and intention and desire to go the extra mile to want to pursue a particular area of study. And so I'll get into some examples for certain types of activities, but they are really trying to look for a clear story. Now, I did mention leadership. I did mention community and commitment. Those are all included in there. But does your resume communicate a clear story? So maybe two ways to think about what to do this summer, and I kind of maybe put it into two monikers. Number one is a student finding their interest, or is the student focusing in? So let me kind of get into that a little bit. Maybe a description to kind of help you understand it is this is our high school milestones roadmap, and if you can kind of see that at the base it's eighth and ninth grade, at the top is 12th grade, and you can see the development of your extracurricular activity involvement over time, like a pyramid, and it's broadest, it's widest at the base and most narrow at the top. So when you're eighth and ninth grade, the reality is that you should be exploring everything. I mean, asking an eighth or ninth grader what they want to do for the rest of your life is unreasonable, you know. I mean, you can even say that asking a 12th grader what they should be doing with their life is unreasonable as well. You know, maybe a fair question. But the reality is that eighth and ninth graders should be exploring all sorts of different things, not limiting themselves to just robotics or just graphic design or just literature. They should be exploring as many things as they can. And then by the time you get to maybe in the 10th, ninth grade, in the 10th grade, you tend to reduce down a little bit, focus in more on the types of activities that really tap into a student's internal motivation, really get students excited, help them feel accomplished. Then by the time you get to 11th grade, you're really focusing only on one, maybe two different areas, and then going more deeply into those one or two areas. So that by the time you get to 12th grade, the story that you're trying to communicate with your activities is much more clear, and you don't have to kind of manufacture a story with your activities. It becomes a natural way for students to explore, but then also a natural way for them to reflect what activities are a good fit for them, and then to develop the kind of depth that they need in order for them to show commitment, leadership, and depth, and have the content they need in order to write good essays by the time they get to 12th grade. So again, pyramid, wide at the base, explore broadly, and narrow down as you go along. So if you're a ninth grade student and you're just exploring, your intent is to find your interest. Perhaps you might participate in an introductory robotics summer program. Maybe you might want to just take a creative writing class just to get exposure to what writing short stories or writing poetry really looks like. Maybe you're getting, again, a local introduction to entrepreneurship. Maybe you're starting to study a new language. I had a student who picked up, who just has this penchant for languages and began studying Arabic at a local community college, loved it, and just continued on. You know, fantastic. And or maybe you're taking a digital art class, whatever the case may be, you're taking the opportunity to find your interest, to really explore what it is that you really want to do. And so maybe as a ninth grader, you're finding your interest, but maybe as an 11th grader, you're shifting towards focusing in and exploring with greater depth. So maybe if you're interested in mechanical engineering, by the time you get to 11th grade, you might be working with a research professor on autonomous automobile systems. Maybe you're leading a summer robotics program for kids from East Palo Alto or from other communities. Maybe you're competing in an American Rocketry Challenge competition where you're leading a team to put together a rocket prototype to launch and compete in different competitions. Whatever the case may be, you're taking a particular interest and then going more deeply into it, finding ways to lead and or inspire others, and then demonstrating to colleges that you have both the motivation and potentially even the academic foundation to be able to handle, in this case, if it's mechanical engineering, to be able to survive mechanical engineering. I think there's sort of like a kind of a sense from admissions reviewers that, like, will this student survive? And so part of what you're doing with the resume is to communicate to the reviewer that I have what it takes to make it through the degree program. So focusing in will help you tell that story better. Let me give you some suggestions for what to do. So what can students do this forthcoming summer? Maybe if you are in ninth or 10th grade, like you can certainly take a class. And so The UC Scout is the accredited online high school for the UC system. Obviously, we're in California, so we are very sort of aware of, excuse me, we're very aware of the University of California system. But the UC Scout is the online high school. You could take classes there for credit. And it is a way to add 4 credit classes to your overall academic profile. Now we can get into kind of specific things with transcripts and et cetera. But a way for you to take 4 credit classes. You can take classes at like online through Udemy, Coursera, edX, or at a community college for credit as well. You can volunteer at like at zoos. I had a student who volunteered who's fascinated with animal science and was a docent at the Happy Hollow Zoo for 3 years. Just loved taking people around the zoo and talking about animals for 3 hours every weekend. She loved it. And so, well, you could be doing math tutoring. You could be there's a introductory sort of leadership internship at the Boys and Girls Club in East Menlo Park. There's an aerospace museum in the peninsula here in the Bay Area where students can participate. So these are just specific examples, but certainly in whatever other region, there are certainly parallel examples, but just ways for students to begin exploring what might be a good fit where there's not a ton of high commitment. There's a few other summer program suggestions. UCLA Summer Institutes, USC Pre-College Summer are just ways for students to explore topics without a ton of commitment. And the programs themselves are not like extremely difficult to get into. And so it's, again, a way for students to explore. Now, if you're in 11th or 12th grade, you are looking for a little bit more depth. So students may be interning in a startup, selling a lot of something. I have a student who was like literally buying sort of knockoff type fashion sweatshirts online, wholesale, and just reselling them online on other platforms, and did gross almost 100K of revenue after a couple of years. I mean, it's great. I mean, that's in itself is quite an accomplishment. You can certainly be doing a research assistant role with a professor. You can get a part-time job. Summer science camp. Certainly, there's a lot of summer science camps that students can help be an intern, or you can also lead summer science camps for other kids and put on your own. I had a student who was doing voter registration for teens. You can pre-register teens to be ready to vote when they turn 18. All sorts of fundraiser via art sales, self-publish a book. I mean, and here's a list of summer programs that are a little bit more selective and show a little bit more depth. So whether they're research-oriented business programs, engineering, whatever the case may be, you can certainly get a little bit more depth via some of these programs. And then I also mentioned at the bottom right, you can certainly expand the research for the fall and spring science fairs, and potentially take some of that research and submit them for academic journal publication. So there's ways to get your depth and to take something that to take a particular area and go more deeply into it and explore it for yourself as a student and really just gain some momentum in whatever area that you're really passionate about. But it also show colleges that you have the depth necessary to be successful in a college level curriculum. And so finding activities that kind of fit into that find your interest category are certainly more introductory, require less commitment, tend to be a little bit easier to get into, don't require prerequisite skills. And then activities that fit into that focus in 11th and 12th grade timeline tend to add depth to a student's interest, requires more commitment oftentimes, demonstrates leadership skills, shows level of achievement, and does often require prerequisite skills, like whether a certain math level or computer science knowledge foundation or some previous research. Maybe a couple of other things just as a reminder to you. As we coach our students, we suggest doing SAT or ACT prep the summer after 10th grade. And so in many cases, not in most cases, but not in all cases, but in many cases, students are finishing, like say, Algebra 2, like sometime in 10th grade, and then they have the content needed in order to start preparing for the SAT, ACT. They can do intensive preparation, whether it's as basic as taking a lot of practice tests or working with a tutor or taking a class, whatever it may be. We often suggest the summer after 10th grade as a time to focus on SAT, ACT prep. And then if students are in the whole competition cycle, whether it's AMC Amy or Computing Olympiad or Bio-Olympiad, oftentimes summertime is a time to do some early prep for the spring competitions that are coming. I did want to also mention that we also have a research internship program that helps match students with PhD level mentors to guide them on developing their own personalized research project. And I realized that over the course of many years of doing this, have had students apply to a lot of summer programs. The summer programs are getting more difficult to get into. And oftentimes they're just kind of running, a lot of students are running out of opportunities. There just aren't enough opportunities for students to be able to do their own work and to really explore a particular area with greater depth. And so we do have our own research internship program that does pair students with mentors. And our students have developed independent projects related to drones, which locate survivors in disaster response scenarios. We've had students do sociological explorations on parent-child relationships within biracial households. And so any range of topic, our network of PhD mentors will be able to support our students. And in addition to, we'll be able to help them find opportunities for them to publish their work out in various journals. So it's a great opportunity for students who are new to research. But the con is that there's no actual lab access. So like if you need a wet lab to do any kind of life science research, that is not a part of the program. But mentorship and guidance on how to conduct your own work, and then finishing out with a paper or any other kind of culminating project is a part of the program. Just to give you more activities because it's good to have lots of ideas. Here is a list of different types of ideas. But I'll tell you one story. The working at McDonald's, I had a student 10 years back applied to a lot of the really competitive research engineering programs and was just not admitted to any of them. It was just hard to get into. And then we said, why don't you just work at McDonald's this summer, get some part-time work? And he worked at McDonald's. And if any of you know the history of McDonald's, McDonald's is sort of like the forefather of fast food industrialization. So they're the ones who developed the sort of like mass scaling of the hamburger to be made fresh, prepared, and done within minutes. And so they themselves are this engineering marvel. And this student who ended up working at McDonald's was just enamored by sort of like the mechanical engineering of making hamburgers. Ended up writing about it on his personal statement. Wrote about his disappointment for not getting their programs, but wrote about like what a blessing it was to actually begin to actually work at McDonald's. Was admitted to Cornell to study mechanical engineering. So you never know. So I think what I'm saying is that just for students to remain active, do things, pursue it. You're always going to learn something. So let me give you a couple of student examples, and then we will go. I think we'll go into Q&A afterwards. So, and if you'd like, you can go ahead and start posting questions. And maybe there's questions there already. But go ahead and post questions, and then we can get into it when we get there. So a student example. This is not a real name of. This is a real student, but not a real name. But it is a real high school. So just in case some of you may recognize this person, so I didn't want to. But Jeannie in this case came to us at the end of ninth grade, already a pretty well accomplished student, just very active. She was a part of speech and debate. Started an art club even in ninth grade with some of her friends. Was a part of science research club. Was a part of Model UN. Again, I will readily recognize that this student is already pretty active. In 10th grade, or the summer after ninth grade is when we began working with her. She did an introduction to research science at USC. She also did a speech and debate camp. She helped lead a speech and debate camp for her junior high kids, the junior high that she went to. Summer after 10th grade, she led the entire speech camp for the junior high kids. So she not just went as a leader, but now she organized the entire camp. We worked together to help her apply to the BU Rise Science Research Program, which is a very selective program. At that time, taking both 10th and 11th, rising 10th and 11th graders. I'm sorry, rising 11th and 12th graders. And then she also did some ACT study. And then in 11th grade, summer after 11th grade, her high school has at that time they had a biotech internship at their school, and that was connected to some biotech firms in the area, and she was able to secure one of the internships. But we worked with her to plan a science exposure camp for kids in sort of the greater Palo Alto area. So we have a friendship with a network of subsidized apartment complexes in Palo Alto, and she led a science exposure camp for 2 weeks every day for 3 or 4 hours. Wrangling in kids from grades third to sixth grade, and simple science experiments, hands-on, a lot of baking soda, those kind of things. And it was just a fascinating experience for her. So much so that she felt compelled by a couple of girls a couple of girl kids that were a part of the camp. Many of these kids who couldn't afford to go to science camp, she she started a nonprofit to raise funds to send these girls to go to science camp. And her fundraising efforts were just go to, doing fundraisers at Chipotle, and other fast food places, and she would raise money to send these girls. And she ended up at the end of the year sending 5 girls to summer camp the following summer. So she was super excited. Let me give you a quick glimpse into her profile: 3.9, 4.4, 34 in the ACT, and a bioengineering major. She applied to these schools. Like what? Let me ask you, what do you think she was admitted to? And you can go to the chat and let me know what you think. So, and if you think she didn't get into any, or if you thought she got into all of them, feel free to comment. And if there's no comments, then I will I will move forward. But what do you guys think? All of them. That's a fair guess. Cornell, Berkeley, UCLA, all but GHU. The person who said all but GHU knows that GHU is the foremost bioengineering program, arguably the foremost bioengineering program in the world. So that's a fair comment from the all but GHU. So let me tell you where she got into. Whoa. Oh, there it is. Okay. She did get into Johns Hopkins. She did elect to early decision to Johns Hopkins, which then means that she needed to withdraw her application to Cornell and Stanford. And then, actually, by timeline, she didn't apply to Stanford quite yet. But thankfully, or not, she opted to leave her UC applications in, which is technically not correct, but she let them ride, and she was admitted to UC Berkeley, UCLA, which then she immediately withdrew her application. But yeah, she overall did well, and I think she was able to communicate very clearly. And then on the every year Johns Hopkins profiles 4 or 5 students in their new admissions class, and they profiled her work to raise funds for students who wouldn't have the opportunity to go to summer camp, and so assigned summer camps. So she got profiled in the admissions new freshman class admissions blog post from Johns Hopkins. All right, let me share about Joseph from Mission San Jose. Let me tell you what when we started working with Joseph, what he was doing. He was doing nothing, so he was not doing anything, and perhaps a reason why his mom brought him to us. And so 10th grade, we suggested that he go to a marine conservation program in UC San Diego. He was remarkably willing, surprisingly. He also did 1 semester of an AP computer science class through UC Scout. Did a little bit of volunteering and did some SAT study, which is a lot for the summer after 10th grade. I will recognize that. So he was busy, but he did it. But then over the course, after the UC San Diego Marine Conservation Program, he was less interested in the marine, like marine sea animals, and more interested in the conservation part of the program. And so in 11th grade, he did some independent research on marsh preservation. And then he volunteered with a nonprofit called Save the Bay to help promote more sustainable practices among community businesses as it relates to saving the San Francisco Bay Area. And then he also was so sort of taken by the Save the Bay experience that he asked the Save the Bay marketing director if he could be an intern, and that Save the Bay marketing director took him on, and he was helping them with social media, writing certain content, and got this internship on how to mobilize for greater environmental conservation. So student with a 3.5, 3.9, 1410 on the SAT. His major ended up becoming environmental studies or ecology, depending on the school. Applied to these schools. Let me ask you, what do you think? um, uh, where do you think he got into? I know it's a little bit of a, a little bit of a, um, but what are your thoughts? Purdue? Certainly. I think that's fair. What other schools do you think he got into? Sure. Northeastern, Northeastern. A lot of people like Northeastern. Um, one gentleman said 5 out of 6. That's fair. Everything but USC is also fair. Illinois, Purdue, Northeastern. I like it. I like it. So these are the results. And whoa, sorry, slides are. And this is where he got into. He did not get into UC Berkeley because 3.55 is too low. So I mean, I think but to be frank with you, I think on our end, we were preparing Joseph to not be admitted to UC San Diego, to not be admitted to UC Davis. We didn't think all three, Illinois, Purdue, and Northeastern, would come through. We thought maybe he would be admitted to one or two, but not all three. And he was admitted to San Diego, Davis, Illinois, Purdue, Northeastern. Just to give you a little bit of context on Joseph, he got a few C's freshman year and got almost all straight A's junior year. So your whole grade trend does matter, like how you portray your academic journey. You can imagine if you're getting a lot of A's freshman year and getting a couple of C's junior year, that doesn't look as good, right? So he did start off high school rather meekly and maybe not as strong as he would like, but finished his junior year super strong. So his 3.55, for like some of these schools maybe a little low, but it's definitely pointing up, and admission viewer would be cognizant of that. So, but we were still surprised on San Diego and Davis, but he was able to communicate very clearly, and then also show some academic improvement over time. So some don't forgets. Find it's either in many ways maybe a simple way to think about it. Again, find your interest or focus in. Grades are still most important. And I encourage families to encourage students to find what is internally motivating. Now, that takes time. That takes some trial and error. You may do something that is not internally motivating. It's okay to pivot and find something else. But I always find that students are happier, achieve more, find more success when they're working in their area of strength, passion, and motivation. And I always this has been my kind of lasting encouragement to parents, especially. Um, and what I'm going to finish with every webinar, but just continue to remind your kids how much you love them, regardless of how their college results turn out. Students are under a lot of stress. They do know in many respects what's at stake, and sometimes it's not from family. Sometimes it's from their peers. Sometimes it's from ambient noise from TikTok and Instagram. But whatever the case may be, let me encourage you to remind them that you love them, regardless of how the results turn out. So, all right, let me go to some questions. I'll bring Anthony back on. It looks like we have one question, which is fine. And if so, then we can all head home and enjoy our time. And I'm also going to leave, if you would like, you can scan for a free consultation here. Go ahead and do that. And this is the QR code for the ebook, if you'd like that. And every question I'll go back and forth on the QR code. How about that? So I'll begin here. And then Anthony, what are some questions that we can work on together?
Yeah, sounds good. The first question was just about specifically about Stanford Medicine, but I think you could broaden this to a lot of these summer programs that are 1 or 2 weeks. The question is just like, when should the student join? What year do you think these types of programs would be more appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, and then Stanford has a range of like medical programs. They have the classic SIMR, which is extremely hard to get into, and I find that it's harder to get into than Stanford itself. And then you have other more active practical internship summer programs at Stanford, regardless of whether it's Stanford or at another university. I think it's important to know whether the program is a more exposure type summer program where it's an introductory program, or whether it's a research oriented program where students are going to be working with a professor, spending 6 to 8 weeks going in depth into a particular topic. And so both are different as far as admit rate or likelihood, and also demandingness for the students. So like when should they be? I mentioned that the more demanding program should be maybe later in the high school years. The more exposure program should be earlier. But it just depends on where the student is at. Maybe still need to really find their focus or find their interest maybe later in high school. It's okay. And you can use those programs as a way to explore. I don't feel like you need to go to a summer program every summer. I think we can get into why that's really not all that valuable. It's also expensive. Like if I can be very honest, like I don't think it's necessary for families to spend obviously that much money. There's other things you can do over the summer, i.e., working at McDonald's, as I mentioned. But it's a little bit of like it depends on the program, depends on where the student is at. But summer programs are a way for students to explore. There's no question.
Sounds good. And then follow-up question of if a summer program of a particular university helps with admissions to that university. I think in general, no, but want to make sure you have a chance to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean the answer is no. And the reality is that now I will then qualify. I'll stick a big asterisk on that by saying that University of Chicago is
Right.
they're not prototyping. They have introduced what they call like an early deadline for any student who went to their summer programs to apply at an earlier date. And the last year was sort of the first year of this. And so the data is not out yet, but everybody understands that it's very likely that that admit rate is much higher. So in that sense, they are targeting students who really know University of Chicago, who really believe that University of Chicago is a place that they want to be, and they're trying to um, tap into a group that already likes University of Chicago, and then giving them their own deadline. So in that sense, I think it's those students are more likely to get into the University of Chicago. But by and large, for all the other programs, no, it does not work that way, unfortunately.
Yeah. I put that information of that program in the chat. Excuse me. But yeah, University of Chicago describes it as an ED0 in comparison to like ED1, ED2. So it's a
Hmm.
early decision for folks that did the summer program. So there's a question about holistic review and how that kind of comes into play with the resume section and the essay section. The question was if the essay should also be focused. But how would you kind of think about that in terms of how the admissions officers are looking at the application?
I kind of I kind of want to qualify the that whole this is my whole response by saying that our consulting director is a former our consulting director president is a former UC admissions counselor, and we have a former Brown, Rice, UT Austin, Stanford admissions director on our advisory board. So we have a fair amount of visibility into this process. But like as far as holistic review, I mean the stock answer that I think every admissions person is going to say that we consider everything, right? But the reality is that I think when you think about if you have this amazing resume but you have a 2.5 GPA, you can kind of be it's kind of fair to say that the top schools are gonna opt out, right? So I think the reality is that if you're looking at Ivy level top 15 schools, the majority of the applicant pool is going to be like very clean academic uh, uh, records, pure 4.0s, very high test scores, and then really the differentiator is the extracurricular activities. And then the essays become perhaps in lieu of not every school has an interview process. So, and I would say, generally speaking, the interview process in the undergraduate level is not overly consequential. And so the essays become sort of in lieu of an interview, the sort of the personal, a very, personal pitch to make a connection with the admissions reviewer. So they all function at an important level. And I would say if you're really on the cusp of a student who might be admitted, then the essays play a much more important role. If you're way above, like well above the average admitted applicant, maybe the essays are not as critical, And so, but the reality is that yes, everything is considered, but it needs to be sort of understood in context.
Mhm. There's a question about legacy admissions and if that's mostly a thing of the past now with changes and yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, since the Varsity Blues event a couple of years back, there's been just a lot of feeling that admissions offices need to be much more clean and fair with what they're doing, and I think um, largely schools are coming out and saying that legacy is not a part of the review process. Other schools may not say anything. So I think if you're not on record to say anything, I would surmise that legacy still factors in. I do want to say that legacy is not everything. So you still need to be a viable candidate. So we've seen plenty of, I mean, we live in the Bay Area. Obviously, there are Stanford alumni families that we work with. You still need to be a very qualified, strong applicant. And but do I think legacy, depending on the context? Now, Stanford, I think historically, legacy has not been as obvious. But certainly there may be other schools where I think like a little bit more pronounced. But I think you know when you're kind of collecting a bunch of inches, the legacy inch could add an inch to the football field length of things that you need in order to gain admission, right? So I'm not gonna, it's another conversation to kind of pinpoint exactly. I do feel like those types of um, aspects of the admissions process are being de-emphasized. I don't think it's largely from the past because I do feel like schools are still mindful of um, of their audience, if that's a way of putting it. So,
Sure.
yep.
Just another question, clarifying the kind of summer programs that we were talking about earlier. The question kind of asking just, so does getting into Cosmos help with the UC admissions at all? I think, yeah, there's a qualification in that of like having that on the application can certainly help explain a student's interest, but there's no additional points per se from the UC admission standpoint. Elton, do you want to add anything to that, or
Well,
is that
I'll qualify that by saying that on the UC application there is a section that says that have you attended a UC summer program, and
Mhm.
Cosmos is on the list of summer programs that is on this on the drop down menu of have you attended a UC summer program. Now, um, technically, technically yeah, and I will throw out the inch term again. Like there is a um, it is not an overwhelming factor. It is not, oh, I got into Cosmos, therefore I'm getting into UC Berkeley, and by far not the case. We've seen too many UC students to combat that, but is there some consideration for attending a UC summer program in the UC review? There is, but yeah, it is very minor.
right?
So I would instead look at the program that students will be able to demonstrate the most depth. So like let's just say Cosmos versus a research program at any number of universities. If a student can focus in on a research thesis or project, generate a paper, and say parlay that paper work into a science fair project later in the year, I think that's way more valuable than what I think a student would accomplish at Cosmos. So this is where I would look at the program first and not just optimize for that 1 inch that may or may not be as worthwhile in the whole process.
And I think last question for today, just asking about how or why it's so much more competitive to get into college compared to like a generation ago. What kind of factors drive it? Asking if it's just U.S. birth rate or other things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a fair question because I mean, this is where I'm of the age where all my friends' kids are applying to college, right? So I mean, it's the common refrain from from us. It just wasn't as difficult when we applied when we applied, but the reality is that the major factor is just applicant pool. So I mean, when you're talking about back when I applied to college, I mean, the Stanford applicant pool was probably like 20 something thousand, right? So, and then now it's certainly like almost 60,000, right? You're talking about like say the UCs were nothing more than like 30 to 35,000, and now you're talking about 173,000 for UCLA. It's intense. I mean, there's no question, right? So I think the reality is that's the biggest factor is really just applicant, like size of applicant pool. I actually don't think that reviewers are looking for different things. They're looking for depth in a particular subject area, leadership, commitment. They're looking for good character. They're still looking for the same things. It's just that it's harder to pinpoint that. And I also do think that demographic priorities have changed where I remember in the 90s, like in 80s and 90s, international students were still getting scholarships to come to the US to study. And so but now international students are really expected to pay full tuition. And that's not as much a priority anymore for many schools. And so priorities have changed, but the type of student that they're looking for remains about the same.
All right, that's all the questions for today.
All right. All right. Anthony, thank you so much. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know it might be late for the East Coasters, for the West Coasters. Thank you for joining us. As mentioned, if you would like, you can feel free to download this QR. Download the ebook via this QR code. We will be having more webinars forthcoming. Anthony wants to have one every week for the rest of the year. I know, yeah, no, you're like, maybe not, but we will have more, and they're coming. So we already have three planned, and we will. The goal is to try to get out as much helpful content as possible. So we will be doing more this coming year, and you'll be seeing me and Anthony's face together, hand in hand. All right, thanks everybody. Good night. Good to see you, or good morning, depending on where you're in the world, and we'll see you on the next one. Take
All
care.
right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.